Step back to the early 20th century, a pivotal era in medical history. Diabetes was a fatal diagnosis with no effective treatment, and those affected had a bleak prognosis, especially children. In this desperate landscape emerged a beacon of hope from the University of Toronto. In 1921, Dr. Frederick Banting, a young surgeon with a fresh medical degree, believed that the secret to controlling diabetes lay in the pancreas, specifically in isolating its extract. Banting, alongside Charles Best, a medical student, embarked on a groundbreaking research project under the supervision of Professor John MacLeod, who provided them with a laboratory and experimental dogs. The duo began by removing the pancreases from the dogs to induce diabetes. Then they painstakingly extracted a pancreatic secretion from healthy dogs. When this extract was injected into the diabetic dogs, the results were miraculous. The dogs' dangerously high blood glucose levels normalized. This extract, which they named insulin, was soon tested in humans. The first patient to receive insulin was a 14-year-old boy named Leonard Thompson in January 1922. The initial results were disappointing due to impurities in the insulin, but after refining the extract, a second administration proved successful. Thompson's recovery was dramatic and immediate, showcasing insulin's potential to manage diabetes effectively. The impact of this discovery was monumental. For the first time, there was a reliable treatment for diabetes. Banting and MacLeod received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1923 for their discovery, which they shared with Best and James Collip, a biochemist who had joined the team later to help purify insulin. This discovery did not just save lives, it altered the course of medical history, transforming diabetes from a certain death sentence into a manageable chronic condition. It also set the stage for ongoing research that would continue to improve the lives of millions of diabetics all around the world. With the discovery of insulin, a ray of hope illuminated the lives of millions suffering from diabetes. The initial breakthrough in Toronto was just the beginning. Following the successful treatment of Leonard Thompson, the news of insulin's potential spread like wildfire, offering not just a medical solution, but a miracle to those in despair. The demand for this life-saving drug soared instantly, highlighting the urgency to produce insulin at scale. To meet this demand, the University of Toronto team made a pivotal decision that shaped the future of medical philanthropy. They chose not to profit from their discovery. Instead, they sold the patent to insulin for just $1 to the University of Toronto. This altruistic act was intended to ensure that no single entity could monopolize insulin production, keeping it accessible and affordable. Soon, pharmaceutical companies were enlisted to develop insulin further and distribute it globally. The introduction of insulin into the medical field brought about transformative changes. Children and adults, once bedridden and facing inevitable decline, were now returning to normal life, going to school, working, and living years, even decades, longer than previously possible. Clinics specializing in diabetes care sprouted up, refining the administration of insulin and improving patient outcomes. Dr. Elliot Jocelyn's Diabetes Mellitus, a book that became a cornerstone in understanding and managing diabetes, emphasized the importance of diet, exercise, and insulin in treatment plans. But beyond the physical, the psychological impacts were profound. Families who once prepared for the inevitable loss of loved ones were now given a second chance. The miracle of insulin was not just in its life-extending properties, but in the restoration of hope and normalcy it brought to the lives of diabetic patients. As insulin continued to evolve, with improvements in purity and efficacy, its role became cemented as indispensable in diabetes management. The promise of insulin was not merely in its therapeutic value, but in the model it set forth for medical innovation, highlighting the importance of accessibility in healthcare advancements. So, as the years passed, the initial promise of insulin was overshadowed by a stark, grim reality. The life-saving drug, once heralded as a beacon of medical altruism, became a tool for profit in the hands of a few powerful entities. Today, the insulin market is dominated by three major pharmaceutical companies: Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, and Sanofi. These giants hold the reins to the pricing of insulin, and they have driven the cost to astronomical heights through practices that prioritize profits over patients. This exploitation is primarily achieved through a tactic known as evergreening, where these companies make minor, non-therapeutic modifications to insulin formulations to extend their patents and keep cheaper generics off the market. The result? Prices that have tripled in the last 2 decades, putting insulin out of reach for many, even leading to the rationing and tragic deaths. This form of medical monopolization has turned a once noble endeavor into a market of greed, where Americans are dying because they cannot afford a drug that their lives depend on. These companies, while they argue that the high prices fund research and development, are often accused of abusing patent laws and manipulating the market to sustain high prices unjustly. This has sparked a fierce backlash from the public and lawmakers alike, who demand reform and accountability. The high cost of insulin has become a symbol of the broader issues within the pharmaceutical industry, where regulatory environments and patent laws are manipulated to maintain monopolies and inhibit competition. The situation is dire and calls for urgent action. Activists and some political leaders are pushing for legislative changes to curb these predatory pricing practices and expand access to affordable insulin. Proposals, including allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies and fast-tracking the approval of generic drugs, is just one step. The story of insulin, from a miraculous discovery to a tool of exploitation, is a cautionary tale of what happens when life-saving medicine becomes a commodity in a market driven by greed. It's a call to action for all of us to demand better, to fight for a system where healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and where medications that are essential for survival are accessible to all who need them.